It's like the skateboard, you know, when you hit a rock. Thinking of where we left off. Happy Monday. We left off talking about all the structure, talking about the steps, talking about the integration. This is me winging it. I did not watch, like I didn't refresh. Sometimes when we're doing an update, I will go back and I'll like skim through the episode to make sure I am caught up and current on what we want to discuss. But this one I'm just gonna wing. And I think we talked about a lot of the substructure that's under the car, plating the frame, getting the pivots for the trailing arm spanned out in the right spot. And then I went to the sheet metal and I held off and I said, till next time. Till next time is this time. So I think what we do is we really dive into not a bunch of updates on this thing, but really the details on the sheet metal that's been accomplished. Saberlight. Saberlight. Where's the extra cords? Can someone please find, we'll send you something if you can just help us find these extra cords for these lights, because these lights are fantastic. But what happens is the actual power source, the cord, shits the bed before anything else, and they are not like normal power sources, they are a problem. So anyways, Saberlight, power cord. Here's what we got. Original intention with Jeff's Bronco, Carrie, is, you know, we needed to do a bunch of extensive chassis work. We needed to get this thing to cycle right. We needed the shocks to be in the right spot. Like there was some things that didn't work. Fortunately, the pivots on the housing, the rear axle housing, that stuff worked out. Joey and I had discussed the roll center theory on why the upper links are spread wider. Definitely on board with all that stuff, but really, I wanted to stress getting something streamlined. And what I mean by that, like for the sheet metal in the rear, is I didn't want to have the exposed tube with sheet metal on the inside. That is the way I've done stuff before. That is the simple way to do it, but it's also the most haphazard for cleanup and for cleanliness on the outside of this vehicle. And it's what we wanted to do here is we wanted to have a hyper exaggerated form of inner fender. Just like you look in any of your, you know, an SUV or the front wheel opening of a car, there's like a, you know, usually some scumbag ABS plastic inner fender that's like injection molded or whatever. And with this, I wanted to just have like your main running gear, your landing gear is the exposed parts, and then no bullshit. No tubes with panels behind them, no places for debris. Like somewhere where you can go in here and you can wipe this clean and it's all fresh and you're not like jamming stuff places and you're not kind of going through those areas. Like this is gonna be a Mexico truck. You're not getting mud in those areas where you just can't get it back out. And I wanna be able to look in here and just see like super clean, just coil over, bypass, bump stop, sway bar arm, hanging suspension, and that's it. And it's just like boom. And it's just this canvas of like inner fender, and so that's what we have here. This is like all, let's think about this. There's one piece here with a welded seam. There's two piece here with a welded seam here. This is the next piece, right? These guys are obviously all their own redundant pieces. There's kind of a little spinal detail here that's added, and then there's upper in here, and I can maybe film some of that with our smaller camera to get you guys the details. There's a Baja Designs rock light that's up here that'll shine through, so there's ton of room for service in here, because when you start enclosing an area like this, the other thing you go is, well, how do you get to the shocks? Well, how do you blah blah blah, you know? And you don't want to dig yourself into a hole where then you're screwing up because you can't fit tooling in here to like adjust your shocks or take them off. So there's quite a bit of room to get in here, and it's the same here, like outboard of where your bolts come in and out. You know, like I have another 3/4 of an inch before that bolt needs to go in. And that's your true chassis shock mount in there. So everything is kind of pocketed inboard. It'll be a really nice detail when that, you know, your suspension's hung and then all of a sudden you have a rock light that's built into there too. So this just adds like this factory look to me, and obviously not factory, but factory in a sense of just the tidiness, and we really accomplished what we wanted to here. Some design challenges to think about. Where's the exhaust go? Where's the exhaust go? This is, you know, we always touch on Carrie because she is a extended wheelbase stock length. So there's a lot of room from B pillar to axle center line that's occupied primarily just by the shock package, and that's it. There's not really any space for, you know, then you have a trailing arm that's under here, and then you have the AGM Dakar jacks. This is the only SUV, well, not only SUV, because I think probably the Gordini and other Dakar vehicles have jacks, but this is definitely the only Bronco I know that has like a big nasty Dakar race jack on it. And that's all mounted. I think we covered the mounts last time, and that'll be really nice. Hit a switch or hit a valve, and this whole one side of this car will lift up, get the front and the rear tire off the ground for, you know, you could do inspection or just changing out flats primarily. So that being said, there's not a ton of room for exhaust. I have ideas on that. I don't want to just have it disappear under the cab somewhere. I want a very potent, brutal exhaust exit for this thing. This is a very potent vehicle itself. What I mean by that is it's like it has a presence, and it's going to be special. Everything from the upholstery to the paint, on top of all the fab work we do to it. So again, I have Jeff, my client, who is on board with making this thing a supreme example of what you can do with a Bronco, that being a four-wheel drive Bronco with 1,000 horsepower. So I want to leave the exhaust until I have proof of concept, but I promise you it's not going to be here. It's going to be up there. It's going to be up. So we'll cover that. Let me hang some shocks in here so we have a good example of what's going on. So CDB, that is not an aircraft certified. That's a aircraft grade 12 point, but it is not an actual aircraft certified bolt. DB does make aircraft certified, but there is a difference. Now, no matter what, this style 12 point is not even comparable in strength. What this has to offer versus like a grade 8 or a grade 9 or like what you call an F911, this is no contest. Just so still good, but they're not aircraft certified. That was one-handed. Okay, that was one-handed. So if you guys look, we'll have a clean hit for this thing, right? And I don't know where. And the thing is, you know, a lot of people build their cars and their chassis like, okay, well, this is the hose we get, or they spec what length the hose they want. There's usually not a lot of planning that you can do in advance to figure that out unless you have like, you know, a mock-up reservoir and a mock-up shock, but this is really easy to replace and modify. So like we'll figure out where we want. We'll probably end up kicking this, and then we'll put a 90 here instead of a straight. Put a reservoir in there. And then what I want to show you is just like what this looks like, where your shocks are just hanging here, right? And that's all you're going to have in here. You'll have that. You'll have your bump stop, which will be extended, and you'll have like the shaft for the bump stop. And then you'll just have a trailing arm, and there won't be anything else in here. So that's what we were going for. If you want, let's check out the other side, and then we'll check out the inside. I would say this side's 95% of where the other side is. You can see there's a seam here that's still tacked. You can see there's some panel work that's not fully tacked and closed up to the chassis. But really, one of the most satisfying things is when you can take your templates from one side of a car and use them on the other side. And you know, to some extent you go, well, yeah, it should be like that. But a lot of times if you start like first off, if you're starting with someone else's car that's already got work done into it, you don't know how square they built that thing. And then if you don't have a point where things were square, then when you start building on top of them, it just compounds the problem and it makes things more and more offset or more askew or out of square. So what was really nice about all of this stuff is Alex added all this chassis, the work that we did on the previous updates. The framework was all good and square from previous. And I literally transferred, I did, and this is a pretty complex pattern and a template to use. And I took all this and I literally transferred it right. I just reversed the brakes and put it right onto this side, and it completely transferred, no modifications whatsoever. Something you might be thinking about, and I know I'm already killing myself for not doing more fab diaries for you guys. Like I said, I get something huge from sharing my knowledge, like I said, it does something for me to be able to hand down whatever experience or, you know, tips I have with patterns like this, and pattern meaning like this step roll, the bead roll layout. You might wonder like, well, dude, how do you go? And if this is like organic, where it's not just like 3-inch radius straight to 2.5 to straight, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's gnarly in here where it's big compound radiuses and directional changes. What I will do is I will like it, so this is all one template, right? Except there's a weld seam right here. So I'll set this thing in here and I'll tape it in as chipboard, as the template. And then what I'll do is I'll lightly start figuring out, like I'll sketch what is our premium design for the area. And that's the other thing too, is when you do layout for panels, if you can do the layout in the car and you can look at it, because the design you're gonna get, the flow that you're gonna get, just like this, if you look at this transfer, like there's a chassis tube through here and everything's favoring that. And then this chassis tube is favoring a split in this whole piece, right? Where there's more mass coming here and there's not an interruption of a bead roll or something, because your strength and your mass is coming through here, right? It's coming through here. So that stuff, you won't identify that if you're just putting bead roll layout designs into these things on the table. You won't understand that. And then you'll put it up here and be like, it looks cool. It's a bunch of triangles with radiuses. Like, how does this flow with the car? Except put more triangles and radiuses in everywhere, and it doesn't actually have any value or concept of design. It's just putting a bunch of shapes into shapes. It doesn't have like a proof of concept. So anytime you can get your panel or just your template, your chipboard in here like I'm talking about, then you can really start to go, okay, and you start drawing big. What makes sense here? What can I get away with? Okay, and make sure I roll this. Don't put keep this as a radius. Don't have this as just a break, because you don't need that right there. You just need something smoother. You don't want to have too much more crinkly shit in here, which is like this. What I'll do is then I start to sketch it right on the chipboard, and I'll leave it loose. But I'll leave it loose and then I'll take it off, and then I'll fine tune my spots that I sketched in, and I'll fine tune them with perfect layout. Once I lay that out on a template, like, so just say this is here. And then I do some layout, right? And it's very light. I could really make a joke out of that, but I'm not gonna do it. And then I'd take that to the table and I'd tighten all that up with, whatever I need to do that. And then I'll take this and I'll cut this whole shape out. So that's gone. So then I have a template that has my bead roll layout in here. So what that does, and I hope you can follow me through this, and if you can't, we'll do a fab diaries on it and say, that was retarded, Morgan. Please do a fab diaries on it. I'll have that cut out. So then, boom, I have my template. I know that that's what I'm gonna use as the generic sheet metal shape, and then I also have my bead rolls cut out on it. So then if I wanna transfer to this side, I have my template, and all I have to do is just trace all this onto the passenger side or the driver's side or the left or the right or the front or the rear or whatever, and it's literally just a transfer. It's already cut out and it's already on your chipboard template, and you just transfer back in, you know, and you have it. Let's talk about the inside of this thing. So, this is our end process. The interesting part of this is, and I think I covered it before, first off, that's like that bottle you find outside the bar parking lot. You know what I'm saying? That's, you're gonna smell that one. It's not what you think, okay? I may or may not have just drank pre-workout while I'm working. Something to think about here, and like I said, I'm mid work on this thing, so just bear with me on I have a lot of layout and template stuff in here. What we didn't want to do, there's a fine line, and I'll say this again because I've done it. I know I've said it before, but it's important to stress it, is if you're going and you're doing rehabs, I call these rehabs on these trucks, where you take all the cancerous shit out of these things and you build it into the best version it can possibly be while still retaining some of the work that's on it. Part of this is like, how far do we want to go on the floors? Jeff and I both do not want to just cut all the floors out. Do we need to cut the floors out? No. Do we need to cut the firewall out? No. Did we need to cut the back out? 100%. So there's a very fine line here. There's decades of Dynamat and bedliner and stuff on this thing too. So when we've had to remove stuff, you're cutting like 5/16 thick of a layer of just life out of this thing. That needed to be done back there, but for here, like, I'm just gonna get the winds where they make sense. We needed to cut big pockets out. If you like look down, Joe, you can see where the tubes and the chassis come through. That's all just root pass right now, so bear with us. That's areas that have to be removed for obvious reasons to make sure that we're able to ensure like a 360 weld. That's it. The like service area that I cut out here, we will put a access panel here. There is an access panel in this area. I'm going to cut that out and put a bigger access panel. And we'll just follow up like a reverse G-string. We're just going to remove all the middle. The area here behind the engine, same thing. We'll just have access panel, right? So all of the powertrain and drivetrain will be able to be serviceable if need be. I don't expect this thing to, like, this is going to be an extensive interior in here. It's not going to be something where you see access panels and you see like raw, like, or just powder coated panels. Like, there'll be carpet in here and it'll be plush. If you absolutely have to get to something back there, maybe for final assembly, or if you're having to remove the engine or you know, install the engine or something, that's where you'd end up using the access panels here. It's not really service where you're like, oh, I got to check this thing out back here. No, go from the front. The engine's not even deep into this thing. Same with the trans. It's all in a very stock location. So you're not having to do any extracurricular shit to be able to see your vitals. That being said, straying away from deleting the floors, it's easy to do, but it's something that doesn't necessarily have to happen for the end goal. Like, every builder at heart loves to do this. This is fun. This is great. It's fulfilling work. Panels are like something that you get great instant gratification from, because the amount of time it takes to fill like triangle panels. I mean, I wouldn't say really complex stuff, but triangle panels don't take a lot of time, and you literally get to take a tube structure that's just a void like this, and you get to put surfaces on it, and then you literally turn it into like a dimensional shape. And for anybody, especially with ADHD, that's the stuff, you know. So right now we have a kind of a county line here of B-pillar rearward sheet metal. I know the end goal here is all carpet, so like going from this to that, Not worried about it at all. We retained all the substructure for the seats in the front. This is a perfect platform for the Sparcos to go in. We talked about the seat structure last time. I don't think there was any of this stuff in here yet. Just jumping around. Right now, I just hopped in here. That's something I should stress, is if you're able to build. Some serious harmonics in there. If you're able to think about like, how much time are you spending in here? Just because it's simple to do it, to fill all this lower floor in really quick, get it done. Think about having to weld this. Okay, now you have to, everywhere where there's a tack, needs to be a seam weld. So what I like to do is I will leave operating areas until the very end. So like where I'm standing, this, I'd like to have a compartment in here, a storage compartment. So we'll build out this portion on each side symmetrically. And it does dip down a little bit. This is also a great catch for like your cell phone and stuff. If there's ever little pockets, like Eric's truck has one, where it's the deepest portion of the truck. So if you drop your cell phone, which does happen, or something else, I don't know what else that would be as important, but maybe a wallet, that thing will end up going into one low part instead of being like by your feet or something floating around. But back here, you'll definitely hit the low spot here. But we'll build out this. We'll build out the vertical wall here, and then I'm gonna leave this open. And I'll leave this open until it's final time, and then we'll build a compartment here that'll be accessible from the front, and it'll be just like an excess storage compartment for whatever that you don't want just floating around in the car. But that being said, this is like where we're at right now. This is gonna be your back wall. These are easy, simple, fun panels. This back wall will be extended up here. I'm just gonna take a random chipboard piece. This will be extended up here, and it'll probably do something where it runs from this junction level, clears here, level, clears, level. What that'll do, that'll have a return here. And then what we'll do is we're gonna put, I wanna say Dan with the Super Crew, he has this stuff that's like Lexan or acrylic or plexiglass, but it doesn't scratch. Like it's a miracle thing, and they use it in drag cars. It's armor or something. And we'll put a partition for the fuel cell. So you'll have, just kind of bear with me on envisioning this. You'll have sheet metal right up to about this point, like a nice horizon line. And then you'll have a return, and it'll bolt in. All this will be clear, and you'll bolt in a nice fuel cell partition, right? I think it'll have to go up here, so it'll do something dynamic. It won't just be a straight hit to here, because it'll be too close to your head. Partitions here, right? And that's just for safety. Like this is a huge fuel cell back here. I can't make sense of having an open fuel cell and then like you're right here, and then all your two guys are up here, and then you're in this full upholstered cabin with air conditioner. And I think there's fumes no matter what that you just can't mitigate without some kind of partition. And then boom, like any kind of fuel stuff. Or fire breakout, like there needs to be a barrier. Just like there's firewalls, there needs to be a rear firewall. We'll put the shell on, and then everything will be contained here. And then once the shell goes on, we'll also have a barrier that comes out here that follows suit as a partition that goes right to the shell. This truck is not designed to have the shell on or off. I am not this take your hardtop off SUV guy. Jeff is not. Quite frank, they just don't look good like that to me, and it is what it is. It's the same with like old Broncos. I'd much rather have like a 66 Bronco. I'd much rather have a hard top. I think the proportions look right than taking that thing off like your Tom Cruise or something, like going to fly a jet after. Get over it. So we'll seal this all off. Like I said, there will be an exhaust treatment going through here too. But we will get into that when the time comes. Another update on this thing is the fuel cell is completely welded, so we can take it out and look at it if you want. It's a very cool shape to look at just to see it. We will send this off, and if I'm jumping around, it is what it is. Just kind of covering it as I go, but all this is welded. We just need to get the bungs welded in place here, so this whole hold down is done, and then we need to mark on here where our pickups are gonna be. We need to have like a nice plate in here for pickups and everything that needs to be going to Pyrotect, where they can make the bladder fit to that. And then on the sides, the side portions here will each have a fill. So there'll be symmetrical fills that'll come out and go right to the hardtop as well. And I don't know if they'll go through here, but they might end up going this way. The only thing I think about with that is if there is a rollover or some kind of crash, having the fuel fill inboard of the plane of the chassis is usually a smarter route than having the filler out here, where if this thing tags into something and crunches, you know, like say this crunches to the profile, you don't want to have your filler be compromised and then, you know, just blowing fuel out upside down is not a good idea. So things to think about, but this is ready to be shipped. I'll take it out just so you guys can look at it. That was a big design challenge. Alex took that on, and it's a very dynamic fuel cell can, but damn, it was like a thing to think about, because it also has to slide out of this chassis, and it has to be able to come out. It has to be secured in the chassis and cradled, but it also has to be slide out, and it's tapered in a way where that creates a lot of thought into how to make it work. Mentioned before too, we still have that storage area to build into here. There's quite a void. Like the interior portion of this, as long as you don't have a roll up back window, this interior thing is just an absolute great use of space. We can get this capacity, which is probably 5 inches, and then we can get another like 3 or 4. You know, so call that 8 inches of depth in like a storage bin. And I'm not too worried about scratching this thing. If we were gonna run raw aluminum on this, I would be like very concerned, and we'd prep it a little better. But this is gonna be a powder coated cell. It'll be a satin black, so it's not a huge concern. There's a sweet spot to this. All right. See what I'm saying? It's a tight guy, but look at the shapes. Now that's like, this is also something where instead of just having a seam, all of the shape in this cell has a return. What I mean by that is if you have one edge and you're looking at a side view of this thing, this is one edge of the outside. And then if you're meeting up with this other edge here, this guy's gonna dip in and have a return break. And then you leave this, and this is your other edge. And then you weld right here. And then a lot of this is stitched on the inside too. Because if you had it where it's this, where your shapes are just this, and then you have a weld here, all the fuel will come and go and fucking burp and blow this thing out. And then you're going drip, drip, you know. So building this stuff where you know there's gonna be, and you don't necessarily have to do that with every side, but at least the sides where you know there's gonna be a lot of back and forth, or you know, or side like lateral movement where it's really gonna press on it, that's where we've put returns in. So everything is pretty solid. This is all 90 too. This is not like, some fuel cell cans will be like 063 or something similar, and this is all 90, so it's solid. Estimates on this, I think we talked about like 75 or 80 gallons, but it's always a win if you can build your chassis and then have a fuel cell that actually fits. It's like a tailored suit. And what I mean by that is you can go and you can buy a suit that fits you pretty decent, but every human is just, you know, the anatomy is just enough where it's offset, where when you get a tailored suit and it's fit to the chassis, it just fits so much better, and you're not having to build extra structure. If you know, sometimes people build out a big chassis and then they put this very crude geometric fuel cylinder and they go, okay, cool, I got some voids here. I'll just build some more structure to hold another structure. When you get a 2-for-1 and you just build this thing as like it's supposed to be there. So also, like, what you can see here is the backside. This is all, this is like just the backside of the sheet metal that's outside of the car. And you know, you'll see like there's some extra edges, like return edges. And what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll either knock those over to make a return like we talked about, like to cusp them, once it's all welded, so I'm not upsetting any of the actual surfaces. And then some of this I'll just trim and I'll sand and float back. Something else we probably want to do is we want to put paint into all this. There's some unwelded area here, but we'll get like a nice strong coating of paint before we cover anything. If we end up doing anything where there's double layers, and what I mean by double layers is if there's, like, say, and we're not going to do this, but just as an example, say we have all this and then we cover this whole area. Then we just locked in raw metal, and we locked it in to the point where you think that it's clear because there's no actual external conditions like water and moisture hitting it. But the thing is, just moisture from the metal will start to deteriorate and rust this stuff from the inside. So if you ever know where you're going to build yourself in like a double layer, paint it. Even if it's just crude and you just take some primer and you blast it and then you put your other sheet on top, then you're ensuring that you're not going to have like some kind of a hazardous rust condition that's going to eat itself from the inside, and then all of a sudden you start cleaning the panel on the outside. Go, dude, where is that coming from? What is this? And then you realize it's because there's pools of moisture and condensation that are inside the sheet metal work somewhere. One more thing to look at with this before we move into the inside again is this is kind of what I was going for. It's like an OEM or a factory car, where this is like what you look like. Like, say you took all your interior panels off, like all your plastic interior panels, and you'd see like this. This is the inside of your car. You know, it's more of a crude side, but it also makes sense because the focal point and the point that's going to get all of the like outside conditions and the debris and the dirt and the mud is going to be the outside there in the wheel opening. So like this is all protected. You can have this and you can run all your wiring and your plumbing, and anything that you don't really need on blast can be tucked away safely in here. And then you just upholster right over all this. If you want to, and we probably will in a couple areas, we can put secondary panels that are trim panels, just like a car would have, where you'd be able to upholster them and you put them in, and then they cover up all the bullshit that's underneath. We're going to take this straight edge and we're going to pretend this is a Dakar jack. This guy goes right here and then it goes right into there, and that's what you're going to live with in this thing. And it's just a cylinder. It does have a fitting on the top here, and that's like your holster for this thing, and then it's clamped down to the bottom. So when you do want to get it out, the only thing that does suck is since it's so long and you want to get this out, like just by this, right? You gotta lift your truck up, either have it on a jack, you know, or I mean like a lift, or just an engine hoist off the back to pull these things all the way out. But the amount of time, or the amount of times that you'd have to take these out, I don't think, you know, install them, and then if one ever fails or needs to be serviced is the time you take it out next. They kind of live with the car. But what I wanted to show you guys is just what we have, like sheet metal treatment on this. If you go back, I don't know what update episode involved talking about the A pillar, B pillar, C pillar, D pillar. but there's quite an extensive amount of structure going on here. And I mean, first off, it's safe and it's totally more than you need. This B pillar right here alone would be fine. That being said, ugly, just straight up ugly. There's a ton of structure in here, but it's just, it doesn't need to be there. And again, like talking about the floors and like, where do you draw the line? Where do you cut all this stuff out? Where, like, you can get into such a wormhole like that. And believe me, I know that from experience. And we wanted to still be able to get our wins. And so this treatment on the pillar, this whole area up here is all plate. It is all structural chromoly with a machine portion for the capture for the jack. So this is a structural gusset that goes in between these tubes. You see point A, B, and C is all tube. And then this is all fully boxed 125 1/8" plate. So that whole thing I integrated into not looking just like sheet metal, but also being a complete structural functional gusset. That cleans that up. This area here, we got sick winds because these cutouts will house, this will house an overlay plate here where we'll put a Baja Designs, a map light here, and we'll put a map light here. The map light here will light up all the third seat area. It'll light up any of the cubbies and pockets on the side of the third seat. This guy will just be like right here. You'll kind of have a map light. So it'll help you put your harnesses on and it'll just give some kind of an ambient light when all these lights are engaged in the cabin. So that's just like that's the best solution I could come up with for tie-in. And then once you put a nice layer of upholstery in here, you got a good seam where you can tuck this stuff. And we'll just get a good wrap all the way around. I think what we'll end up doing in this area is we'll have just another trim piece that kind of seals this off before that partition like we talked about here. All of the shock reservoirs, all that crap is just outside the car. You don't deal with that. And what all this extra area in here enables is for all wiring harness. We want to just try to have this thing be stealthy where you don't see, you know, if you see plumbing or hardline, it's because you're supposed to see it. It's not something that's there because we couldn't fit it anywhere else. We use it as a design feature that's functional, and that's it. So this gets like our main cleanup done. What'll be here, like you don't see any holes here, but this will just be like an aluminum overlay plate that'll house the Baja Designs light Frenched in here. They're super simple to do. It's the same as the shock mounts on each side. They have that. And then what happens here is this is a small trim piece and you'll have just a capture piece on here. So you'll put the jack in and then there'll be a nice capture trim that seals everything up right here. Has like a rubber flap or some kind of neoprene that kind of gives like a dampener that just wraps around all of the jack, and then we're done. And that's all sealed up. So next on this thing, I am gonna finish just the areas we talked about on sheet metal. Back wall, partition areas. I don't know if we'll put the actual partition glass in yet. And then obviously these side cubbies, but not the middle. Leave the middle open. Same with this. We'll probably get this stuff opened up and we'll get it sheet metaled like with whatever style access panels we need to put in. After that, you can see the intrusion bars are missing. I don't have an answer on this yet. I don't know if we, like, obviously you want to tie into your structure. So if we just shot one down the middle, it would just be dead and it wouldn't really do anything. But I don't know what our solution is. Right off the top of my head, we'll just put in arrow tube, streamline tubing like we do. But I don't know yet. The other thing is if we add structure, I don't know if we want to put any more structure down to like the seat frame or anything, but I don't think it makes any sense. There's not really any tie-ins going from here out to the engine bay. So we might just leave it, just put intrusion bars in and call it a day. Like this, all this is very profound. I don't think that there has to be a ton of middle tie-in. The frame and then everything that goes to the frame on the outsides and then all the X's that go through the chassis, we're in a really good spot. So I think we'd be able to leave this stuff. But what needs to happen after I finish the sheet metal here is we need to finalize our foot controls. If that's where they want to live, so be it. I did talk about putting in some kind of adjustable foot controls that can just go forward to rearward. Might not even need to do that. I like adjustment in some areas, but you know, usually you're building these cars for a individual, and it's their car, and you don't really need to adjust these things unless they're like, well, my wife's going to drive it, or blah 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 is going to drive it, or we're going to split the driving duties and race and this and that. You can really tailor these things just to that person, unless there's some oblong size. Usually, even if you're tailoring like the foot controls and the hand controls and the steering wheel and the seating position, most people can get in and feel comfortable in these things. So what needs to happen now, on like current right now, is the work on the car is finish the sheet metal. The work off the car is I have a full dash, center console, and upper console to design. We need to order Resto Mod units for this. We're going to run 2 Resto Mod units in this. So I'll run a big blower, and we might put a secondary in here and not have to worry about running the secondary anywhere else. We'll just have 1 and 2. This thing is, you know, Jeff is stressing on it being completely ice cold, no matter what the outside conditions are. So the way to do that in high horsepower vehicles like this, especially with like firewall headers and all kinds of power, is you need to have 2 units. And like Resto Mod Air, I think that's a superior unit these days compared to like vintage air. So we'll kit that stuff out, and then I will have full drawings, full visual communication sketches of the upper console, big robust dash and center console, and whatever that looks like. And that's kind of where we want to be. One more thing that's going on with the car that we're not really in control of right now is the front. We talked about doing a lower engine crossmember that is going to be all plate and boxed, and it'll also utilize a trophy truck PSS rack. So their big ass rack that's on the truggy. It'll use that. It'll have a slider and it'll run swingers still, but it won't be a box, and we're going to change it up. We're going to have a full rack setup in here instead of a box setup. It'll be something different. It'll also be something that's available for other people to run in their Broncos. The pivots for the beams will be integrated into the crossmember. The steering swinger will be integrated into the crossmember. The steering swingers will be billet. They'll be all machine parts, and there'll be a couple other trinkets in there that are machined. So that stuff's currently being drawn, and then it'll need to be machined, and then all the actual raw steel stuff will have to be laser cut. That being said, the front, once we start getting parts and pieces together for the front, someone else can be putting together and fixturing the crossmember, even while other stuff's being machined, and simultaneously we can get going on the dash. So we've been off this I've had to kind of just bite the bullet and finish a couple projects and just get them through that last 20% or 15%. The classic phrase is the first 80% of a vehicle takes 20% of the time, and the last 20% of the vehicle takes 80% of the time. And I think that number could even be skewed, where 90% could take 10% of the time, and the last 10% can take 90% of the time. Did I say that right? Oh, brain busters. So that's our Carrie update. If you guys have questions or comments, please feel free. I know that template example was piss poor. There's a lot, like, I just gotta buckle down and start committing to getting the Fab Diary stuff done, because like I said, and I'll continue to say, I enjoy sharing that stuff with you guys. I think there's something huge about sharing knowledge, and I'm gonna be the one that does that with you. So thank you for your support. Have a good Monday.